The story of the Great Flood according to the ancient Aztecs. Before the Great Flood, which took place around 4,800 years after the creation of the world, the country of Anahuac was inhabited by giants, all of whom either perished in the inundation or were transformed into fishes, save 7 who fled into the caverns, so the legend goes. Quote, when the water subsided, one of the giants, the great Hua, nicknamed the Architect, traveled to Cholula, where, as a memorial of the Tlaloc, which had served for an asylum to himself and his 6 brethren, he built an artificial hill in the form of a pyramid. No matter where you look, descriptions of cataclysmic flood that destroyed the world can be found in nearly all ancient cultures, and accounts of giant gods who built pyramids after the Great Flood. The Great Flood was supposedly sent by God or the gods upon the earth in order to destroy civilization as an act of divine punishment. This story is a widespread theme among many cultures, cultural myths, and is perhaps best known from the biblical story of Noah. But despite the fact that Noah's story of the Great Flood may be one of the most famous and well-known flood stories, it is not the oldest one out there, and it certainly is not the only one. There are several others, perhaps less famous, versions such as stories of Matsya in the Hindu Puranas, Deucalion in Greek mythology, which translates to Noah. Deucalion actually is a compound word meaning man of good omen, just like Noah means man of good omen. The oldest and original account of the Great Flood is, according to scholars, that of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This historical fact is clear evidence how many of the world's oldest cultures have stories describing a great flood that devastated earlier civilizations on Earth. Curiously, a great deal of similarity exists between several of the flood myths, something that has led many authors and scholars to believe that these have evolved from or influenced each other. And despite the fact 3 stories of a great flood exist in nearly all ancient cultures on Earth, mainstream scholars are divided in opinion whether or not such an event took place on Earth. However, scientists do recognize that in the distant past, thousands of years ago, a catastrophic flood did take place on Earth, but most scientists deny that there was a massive flood, a great flood, that occurred in the last 6,000 years that covered major parts of the planet. The ancient Sumerian Nippur tablet is believed to describe the oldest account of the Great Flood and the creation of both humans and animals on Earth. It also records the names of antediluvian cities on Earth and their respective rulers. The Eridu Genesis is believed to have been composed circa 2300 BC, is considered as the earliest known account of the Great Flood, and predates more popular Great Flood descriptions in the biblical book of Genesis of the Old Testament. Many authors and scholars believe that the Sumerian accounts of the Great Flood eventually gave birth to more popular flood stories like the one described in the Bible. However, if that's true, how did the story of a great deluge make its way all the way to Mesoamerica thousands of years ago? The Aztec flood stories. There are several accounts of Aztec flood stories, but authors argue that the most famous of them all is that of Nota, the Aztec version of Noah. Nota, Noah. Even the name sounds familiar. Now, this sounds similar. When the Sun Age came, there had passed 400 years, then came 200 years, then 76. Then all mankind was lost and drowned and turned to fishes. The water and the sky drew near each other. In a single day, all was lost, according to the legend, but before the flood began, Titlacahuan had warned the man Nota and his wife Nena, saying, make no more pulque, but hollow a great cypress into which you shall enter the month Tozoztli, the waters shall near the sky. They entered, and when Titlacahuan had shut them in, he said to the man, thou shalt eat but a single ear of maize, and thy wife but one also. And when they had each eaten one ear of maize, they prepared to go forth for the water was tranquil. Ancient Aztec document Codex Chimalpopoca, translated by Abbe Charles Etienne Brazier de Bourbourg, says if we take a look at the five suns, the doctrine of the Aztec and other Nahua peoples, we will find the following eras, creations, and destructions. 1. Nahui Ocelot, jaguar sun. Inhabitants were giants who were devoured by jaguars. The world was destroyed. 2. Nahui Echecatl, wind sun. Inhabitants were transformed into monkeys, and this world was destroyed by hurricanes. 3. Nahui Quahuitl, rain sun. Inhabitants were destroyed by a rain of fire. Only birds survived, or inhabitants survived but became birds. 4. Nahui Atl, water sun. This world was flooded, turning the inhabitants into fish. A couple escaped but were transformed into dogs. 5. Nahui Olin, earthquake sun. We are the inhabitants of this world, and this world will be destroyed by earthquakes or one large earthquake. So the legend goes. The fourth one, Nahui Atl, describes what many believe is a great flood. This world was flooded, turning the inhabitants into fish. A couple escaped but were transformed into dogs, as we said before. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the fourth sun, Nahui Etl, 4 water, ended in the gigantic flood that lasted for 52 years. Only 1 man and 1 woman are said to have survived, sheltered in huge cypress, but they were turned into dogs by Tezcatlipoca, whose orders they had disobeyed. After the Nahui Atl comes the Nahui Olin, the world we live in today, which according to Aztec mythology will be destroyed by one large earthquake. Different versions of Mesoamerican floods, especially those by the Aztec people, tell that after the Great Flood there were no survivors and creation had to start from the beginning, while other accounts describe how current humans are descended from a small number of survivors. Before the Great Flood, which occurred around 4,800 years after the creation of our world, the country of Anahuac was inhabited by giants, all of whom had either perished in the inundation or were transformed into fishes, save 7 who fled into caverns. When the waters receded, one of the giants, Xelhua, surnamed the architect, traveled to Cholula, where as a memorial of the Tlaloc, which had served for asylum to himself and his 6 brethren, he built an artificial hill in the form of a pyramid. He ordered bricks to be made in the province of Tlalmanalco at the foot of the Sierra of Quecotl, and in order to convey them to Cholula, he placed a file of men who passed them from hand to hand. The gods beheld with wrath an edifice, the top of which was to reach the clouds. Irate at the daring attempt of Chelhua, they hurled fire onto the pyramid. Numbers of the workmen perished. The work was discontinued, and the monument was afterward dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. Giants lived on earth before the flood, and Chelhua was one of the 7 giants in Aztec mythology who escaped the flood by ascending the mountain of Tlaloc in the terrestrial paradise and afterwards built the great pyramid Cholula. A Dominican monk wrote this account. Chelhua was a giant of the time of the universal deluge. He was one of the 7 giants in the Aztec culture before the pyramid in Mesoamerica was complete. Fire fell upon it, causing the death of its builders and the abandonment of the work. This was from Ancient Code, and it's on Humans Be Free. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.